Hello and welcome to Talk Spooky to Me, the Ghost Story Guys mail show. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
And this is our opportunity to hear from you, our listeners. And we're actually doing it this time, Paul. We're actually reading listener mail. What is happening? The world has turned upside down.
Dogs and cats living together. It's crazy.
Just nutty. Yes, on this episode, we are sharing actual listener mail. We don't have any guests lined up. And I've been looking forward to this because as much as I enjoy having guests on, meeting new people, man, it's just nice to hang out and shoot the breeze.
It is indeed. And hear from our beloved audience.
Always. So before we do
Cowboys
that,
fans.
Well, no one's perfect. That's fine.
Hey, I don't care. My team's top of that league. I don't know what's going on.
My team is also, nope, I can't even be bothered to conjure a joke there. I have no idea.
You look like a Carolina Panthers fan to me.
You know
Fucked
what?
Off.
I was going to say, Carolina's gone through enough. They don't need to have to deal with me too. The Carolinas have already suffered.
Yes, bless them.
But before we get to listener mail, my friend, how have you been?
Very well, thank you. I've been binging on a variety of paranormal and cryptozoological documentaries. Expedition X has finally started over here, so it was a bit strange getting used to the new presenter.
Oh, where? What happened to Josh?
Jess, I don't know. Josh is still running. It's Jess that's left.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so they've got a new member of the team, a lady called Heather, who's a paranormal investigator.
Oh, okay.
And so, yes, first episode they're running around the infamous asylum in West Virginia, the Trans-Allegheny.
Oh, very cool.
Yes, the home of the ice pick lobotomy.
That is a curious claim to fame.
Yes, well, you know, when 14% of the people you perform it on die, it tends to stick with the location.
So that was the place where that process began?
Yes. As
Really?
they were he basically decided one day he looked at an ice pick in his kitchen and he went to work and started using it.
He just woke up one morning and thought, boy, you know what I bet would solve people's brains? Driving a steel spike into them.
Yes. Yeah, 14% fatality rate.
Good God. You know, that reminds me, years ago, I met this dentist at a wedding. And I for a variety of reasons, I just kept asking questions to keep him talking. And one of the things I learned was that the model of the modern mouth, the sort of the model which we are all sort of regarded in comparison to, is apparently just some dentist years ago had to go to a conference and give a presentation. So he x-rayed his kid's mouth and then just took that and he's like, yeah, here, this is what all you idiots should look like. And there was no scientific basis for this whatsoever. And decisions have been made off the basis of this ever since. And while, you know, we believe in science in this show, you know, get fucking vaccinated. Sometimes I understand people's hesitation because sometimes it seems like things just get pulled out of their asses.
Yes, I remember a similar feeling washing over me when I saw that mouse with an ear growing out of its back.
You said you weren't going to tell anyone about that. I showed you that in secret. Mr. Wiggles is my pet project, and I will make a super mouse.
Yes, I you know, I'm a big believer in pushing the boundaries of science, but I'm also very comfortable in thinking about Victor Frankenstein, and just because you can doesn't mean you should.
That reminds me of an article I once read in Harper's years and years ago. They were talking about the possibility of growing organs, human organs, inside animals. And the author sort of said, like, this is all well and good, but what happens when we chimera enough of these things together that one of these motherfuckers says, I love you? And it's a great, you know, it's a great and both terrifying thought experiment.
Absolutely. And stop using animals for experiments, please.
Yeah, that would also be good.
There's enough horrible bastards in the world. Use them. Just a thought.
No, that is fair. Speaking of horrible bastards.
Yeah, I've had a good week, thanks.
Me too, thank you. When I was in Victoria, I started watching that Crimes of the Paranormal series that our patron CT was telling us about. Have you had a chance to watch any of it?
No. Julie has very kindly... Oh, that's something else I've managed to catch up with Agatha all along. So Julie's re-signed us up for Disney after my self-imposed strike Because clearly doubling the price has worked out really well for them, because they're now offering it for £3 a month here.
Oof. Yep.
So I've found it. It's on my watch list because it's via Hulu on that.
Yeah. Same in Canada. It's on Star. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I won't spoil anything, but I will say I've watched all but I think one episode. And I think it's actually one of the better paranormal series I've seen. I'm not, as you know, I'm not really a fan of most of these series. I think they're dog shit. I think most of them are late. No, I don't like to judge, but but yeah, so I think most of them suck, but I've really quite enjoyed this. And the thing I like about it is it's not necessarily trying to prove the paranormal encounter or phenomenon that they're discussing. It's kind of more about the fallout from belief in that thing. We were talking about horrible people, and there was the fella who set off that bomb in, I believe it was Nashville.
Oh, yes.
And now, in fairness, it sounds like he was mentally ill. I should, but regardless. But when it started, I was watching it with Nikki, and they started talking about lizard people. And I thought, if this goddamn show starts making the case for lizard people, I'm going to shoot a hole in my television like Elvis. But I was really grateful when instead they kind of went into the history of the belief in lizard people, including, the anti-Semitic tropes and taking it right back to guys like David Icke and things like this. So instead of exploiting what it could have been a really horrible thing by kind of entertaining, what if this is real, it just sort of examined like what happens when you fall into a rabbit hole of about this shit and how it can kind of damage you. And I thought that was really cool.
Yes. I mean, did they go to the airport to speak to any of the lizard people that live under it?
Weirdly, the lizard people were not available for comment. And maybe next time, maybe on the next season. But yeah. So anyways, Crimes of the Paranormal, folks. It's a pretty solid series. I think the best episode in terms of actually examining like what could be a real paranormal thing is Granger Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, without getting too far into it, because that's not really the point of this particular episode, but I think they make a compelling case for why Granger Taylor, what they found or what the police claimed to be the remains of his truck, were not actually his truck. I think I was not aware of this particular evidence, and I think it is compelling. If it is as presented, I think it's compelling. I mean, do I think Granger Taylor was taken away by aliens? Probably not. But by all accounts, he was a brilliant man. And, if they're going to take someone, it would probably be a person that most people think is a little bit weird. Yes. And Taylor was that. He was kind of an outsider, but just brilliant. And so it made me think differently about the situation, which I think is probably one of the highest praise I can give a show like that, because usually they don't do a great job of changing minds. It's either just pure belief or pure debunking, whereas this was actually like, no, let's talk to his family, let's talk to his friends. And without saying directly why this could have been faked, in presenting evidence that I think is, again, makes a very interesting point.
Reminds me of because obviously I've watched 2 of the Unsolved Mysteries episodes, and the cattle mutilations is for those of a stronger stomach, shall I say. Don't watch it whilst you're eating dinner like I did.
Oh, no.
But obviously, I don't know if that says a lot about me. It didn't bother me in the slightest. But it was very interesting that they had a vet and a sheriff on there who both said, yeah, these aren't animal attacks. They spoke to a rancher in Oregon, because a lot, they cover the more recent ones,
right,
that have happened in Oregon and Washington. And so one of the guys there, this was 2019, and he saw he said there was something strange. This cow was acting a bit weird the day before, and so they put it in this pasture at 6 p.m, and then 8 a.m. the following day they found her dead with a massive hole cut in her side.
Jesus.
And the authority said, oh yeah, bear attack that. And the guy went, do bears carry knives?
I was going to say, yeah, the well-known surgical bear.
Yes, well, and they showed the pictures. Clearly, you can see it. I mean, they're showing some of the old footage. I mean, there's the famous ones with the serrated bits down in New Mexico and stuff. I mean, there's a really freaky picture as well of one guy who went into his field and he saw his cow just sat there, sort of sat up. And as he approached it, he realised it was dead.
Oh.
But it was dead, sat up, frozen.
Oh, God. That sounds haunting.
And it's just a really weird... It's like a little... It's like if you didn't know it was dead, you'd think it would just sat there. Head's off the ground. It's not laying down. It's not on its side. It's sat up.
Jesus Christ.
Freaky.
Well, I have not watched that, but I will after we record this episode because I'm very curious.
Yes. And, some really good interviews, some really annoyed ranchers, and Christopher O'Brien. So what more do you need?
Sounds like a party to me. All right, well, before I sit down and watch Netflix's new episodes of Unsolved Mysteries, we're going to get to the mail.
Our courteous and efficient staff is on call 24 hours a day to serve all your supernatural elimination needs.
We're ready to believe you.
Our first message is from Tracy, who says, just listen to the episode, We Sold Our Souls for Ghost Stories, and I was so fascinated. Something Paul said made me remember this show, which I watched back in 2010, and I think you'd love it. And the show is Spirited. And I have to say, I've never heard of it.
No, I was thinking that. I didn't recognize it either.
So I will have to investigate.
I cannot get my script to load. Not only do I not recognize the name of the show, I actually don't recognize any of the stars. I think, Angus Sampson I recognize, so this must be an Australian show. Because I recognize him from the Insidious movies. He was one of the technicians, and he's also in the Mad Max films, Fury Road and Furiosa. So I think he's Australian, so it must be an Aussie show.
Yeah, because one of them I recognise from being in Peep Show over here.
Oh, there we go. Filmed in Sydney.
So yeah, it must be. I don't think it's ever been shown in the UK, strangely. I shall investigate further. So thank you for the heads up, Tracy.
Next up is from Chelsea. Chelsea says, hey guys, just started listening to your podcast. Loving it so far. It was recommended to me from the Supernatural Then and Now podcast. I started from the beginning, so I know I'm late on your requests for certain things. Really just wanted to pop in and say I'm one of those people who frequently has dreams that come true, as well as shared dream experiences. It's been happening almost my entire life. I've also had all kinds of paranormal experiences in my life. When I was young, I really got into the spirit board and the occult, and it's been a natural inclination for me ever since. I've used the board in a haunted place and had weird things happen. I've contacted deceased family members for friends and had specific information validated. And I know UFOs aren't your thing. Oh, you haven't listened all the way to the front. But I have a few of those stories as well. My life has really just been seemingly full of inexplicable happenings. Let me know if there's anything specific you're now looking for in regards to stories, and I can go into more details for you. Regards, Chelsea. Well, Chelsea, if you have made it to the most recent episodes, if you're hearing this, please do. We would love to hear all of it. UFOs, anything spooky. We don't really have a limit. We've really kind of opened up the show as far as what we're willing to talk about on here. And I don't know. I'm trying to think, is there anything someone could send in where you would just automatically go, this is bullshit?
Demons.
Oh, okay, that's fair. Yeah. Like, now when you say demons, are we talking like someone actually sees like fire, brimstone, scaly tail?
All of it.
All of it. Okay. So what if they think it's a demon, but it's like a malevolent entity?
That's okay.
Okay. But if it's full on like Christian red tail demon, we're not having it.
Not today, citizen.
Get behind me, Satan.
I kick ass for the Lord.
All right, yeah, so Chelsea, send away. We would, again, very much love to hear what you have to say.
Next, Haley writes, Hi, Ghost Story guys. I found your podcast about a week ago, and I've been listening to it every day after work since then. I'm writing to tell you about my experiences with things that I can't explain. But first I need to mention something that I can explain. Marching bands. Uh-oh.
Dun, dun, dun.
The first episode of yours that I found and tried out was the Keep Utah Weird episode. It had me hooked. But the bit about not understanding the hype about marching bands almost gave me pause. I know it's not for everyone, but as someone who was in it for a total of 8 years, high school and college, and yes, has even marched in the Victoria Day Parade, it is about being part of something bigger than yourself. Yes, it's corny, but there's a lot of that goes into shows and a lot of pride that comes out of all that hard work. Anyway, I respect our difference of opinion, and I'm sure glad that I continued listening. Haley's also shared a story she mentioned, and we'll be covering that in one of our upcoming listener shows. So, Brennan, what do you have to say about what you said about marching bands, eh?
I've been called on the carpet. I'm doubling down. Marching. No, I'm kidding. Well, we always say on this show, like what you like. That's the big thing. Like what you like. And I have no doubt that it is an enormous amount of effort that goes into that. And in fact, I have a small idea, because when I was a kid, I played the trombone very badly, but I played the trombone. And I know how much of a pain in the ass it was for me just to play that one instrument. So to coordinate, and I played a few concerts, for school, things like this. And just watching the teacher try and coordinate a small group of us chucklefucks, I cannot imagine trying to organize an entire, some of those bands are just massive. So you've got to get all these very, very talented people arrayed into one place and then keep them all on mission, which I can't imagine is easy. So I have a huge amount of respect for people who do that.
Yes, I think it's because it's just not a thing here either in the UK. We've got brass bands, but marching bands, no. The military do it for Trooping the Colour and stuff, but schools and stuff, it's just not a thing. Colleges and universities, it's just not a thing. And obviously I know it's intrinsically linked in the States to American football usually. And it's a big celebration of the town and the college and the game and everything. It's all part of that process. So, but yeah, it's a completely alien concept, really. I mean, there are probably a few marching bands here or there and everywhere around the UK. There's always, if you've got people who are prepared to dance around some swords in the middle of Sheffield on Boxing Day, I'm sure there's some marching bands happily performing to an audience that appreciate and enjoy everything they do.
Oh, 100%. I have no doubt. And again, I have a huge amount of respect for the effort that goes into it. But to me, though, it's all a little bit part of, we've got sort of like a military thing here, like just this. And again, we got nothing against the military here on the show. We've done a number of Haunting in the Military episodes. We have a number of the, folks who've served in various militaries in our audience. But I'm a little uncomfortable with public displays of militarism and kind of marching and shit like that. So I think that also feeds into my kind of reservation about marching bands. I remember when I went to the Cubs game I went to in 2008 when I was in Chicago, and I always wanted to see the Cubs. I will not hear a bad word about the Chicago Cubs.
Why? I
will blow this entire show up. I love that team. I have loved that team since I was a kid, and I had a television that only went up to channel 12. 12 was WGN, so I watched the Cubs.
Yeah, it's all about the coaching, apparently, baseball.
Yeah, I deserve that. That's fair.
It's better than cricket. That's what I'll say about baseball.
That's fair. But anyway, so I was at this ball game, and then jets flew overhead. Mm-hmm. I thought the Ruskies were coming. And everyone's like, oh, hooray, the military. I'm like, I guess. I like it when the planes are on our side, I suppose, but I don't know. It always weirds me out a little bit. Even that happened once in England. Nick and I were there for Christmas in London, and for some reason jets went overhead, and I'm like, I'm happy that everyone's cool with this, but there is just this latent part of me that thinks jets flying overhead is a bad sign. But again, that's just a me thing, I think.
It's probably the Red Arrows when you were here, just doing some kind of display for Christmas or something.
I don't think it was, because Nick's a big fan of the Red Arrows. This wasn't that. This was again, I'm sure it was harmless. I mean, the fact that again, the commies did not march into Regent Street and start possessing everyone's iPhone. I'm not worried about it, but it was just, I don't know. I still just kind of feel weird about it.
Yeah, my high school was on an RAF flight path.
Oh, Jesus Christ! Well, they probably had to keep you fuckers in line.
About 2 or 3 flights a week we used to get.
Oh, man.
Brilliant. And when I was at Loch Ness, there was a Harrier went flying over Loch Ness when I was there.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that was cool, actually.
I feel like this is like good. that the ship they make in Captain America 2 that's keeping an eye on everyone who seems kind of dodgy, superhero-wise. I feel like they knew where you were going. They're like, oh, well, let's just keep some jets on this best little guy.
Yeah. Well, I think, I've got a lot of time for the US now because they're obviously much better because my uncle taught them.
Naturally, yep.
And when he was seconded by the US military from the Royal Navy to teach them reconnaissance in Pensacola. Yeah, back in the early 80s.
I'm just imagining you coming out of a pond like Martin Sheen in Apocalypse Now. The end is playing. You got a knife in your teeth. You're going to kill Marlon Brando.
It's a good night, that.
Yeah. He had it coming.
So yes, Haley, marching bands are cool. We just don't have it here, that's all. But then again, Americans seem terrified of mushy peas, weirdos.
And I'm just weird, Haley. So I'm just weird. But I'm happy you kept listening, and welcome to the show. This one comes from Molly. Molly says, "Hi, Brennan and Paul. I had a very odd occurrence while I was listening to the sanatorium episode. The episode kept getting staticky, and when I paused it and rewound it, it was fine. It happened multiple times and got worse and worse if I didn't rewind. I've never had a paranormal experience at my house where this happened. I was in my basement. It's always the basement, isn't it? I'm a big fan, Molly." Thanks for writing, Molly. You know, honestly, we hear about this kind of thing a lot, and I just think it is the delivery method, because...
It's not.
No, right, it's me. It's me.
No, it's the lizard people.
Right. Yep, of course, the lizard people. Yep.
We just need to write a nice letter to Denver Airport and ask them to stop interfering on Molly's playback, please.
I'm just imagining a bunch of marching bands doing like a Pied Piper, all the lizard guys into the sea.
No, well, that's not going to work, is it? Lizards like water.
Oh, right. Shit.
You want to march him up to Alaska? You want to get rid of him, mate?
This is why I'm not a military guy, Paul. That's why I'm afraid of jets, and why I can't plan a military action to save my life.
Yeah, that's why you always have those stories of like lizards falling out of trees when it drops to like under 25 degrees in Florida. And they say, watch out for the lizards, might get hit you. Don't hang around under trees, you might get clobbered by a comatose lizard.
Yeah, so I got fired from my last job as General of the Water Nation. Kept trying to go to fight with the fire guys with flamethrowers. Went real bad for the water guys.
Deary me.
But yeah, Molly, I suspect it's probably just the platform. I very much doubt it's anything paranormal. The things like Spotify and Apple are a horror show for independent providers, for everyone, just because they quite often have problems with the software. But because they're such a monolith and they don't have to respond to anyone, they just don't give a shit. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've had people say, well, you know, I was streaming your show through iTunes and it just stopped and went back and then stopped and went back. And, you know, it's something wrong with your episode. And I have to tell them, like, no, it's not the episode. It's the platform. But you know, with small shows, people tend to go, oh, well, no, Apple wouldn't have shit like that happening. It must be, you know, you goober. And it's really just, it's the platform. And I tell you, Paul, with this change Apple's making to Patreon billing, speaking of things that should be driven into the sea, I hope they're next. I am furious about this because I guess, yeah, as of next month, people are not going to be able to subscribe to our show using the iTunes app or the Apple app for Patreon, because Apple is forcing Patreon to change the way its subscribers bill their customers. It's a whole thing. On that note, we're going to take a quick break for some ads. We'll be right back.
Do you want to join the lizard people?
I mean, are they hiring? And we're back. Paul and I are still bitching about Apple.
And lizards. We should ask the lizard people to intervene. I've got my lizard-friendly t-shirt on today, so we're all good.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you got your Creature from the Black Lagoon t-shirt.
Classic. I used to have an Invisible Man one, but I can't find it.
You motherfucker.
I think it's next to me camouflage trousers.
Well, look at the time. Thanks for tuning in. Here's a musical guest. Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Still got it. Our next missive is from Lisa at the Dreary Midnight Podcast. Hey, Brennan and Paul. Y'all mentioned Angola briefly in your prisons episode. I'm sure there's a ton of traumatic stories there beyond the paranormal and or prison-related. Before it was a prison, Angola was a plantation. One of the main owners of the land, Isaac Franklin, was considered one of the most prolific slave traders in the US, so the land already had a low bar for human rights. For reference, Franklin retired in 1836 after 8 years in the slave trade with $1 million of 1836 money, which is worth at least $26 million in today's currency. He and his business partner operated out of Alexandria, Virginia, even though Alexandria became the third largest port city in the US for the slave trade. Franklin and Armfield tended to use the forced march method of transferring the enslaved people further south. For example, they would walk them to New Orleans rather than sailing. There's a few links below that I've used for tour research. A great book is How the World is Passed by Clint Smith, which discusses the discussions of slavery in American history tourism. Monticello talks about slavery very differently in Angola, for example. As always, the spectre of American history looms, and there's always something new to learn. As always, I appreciate the show and look forward to many more. Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate that. And we'll put links in the show notes to the books that she mentions. It's really, that's one of the difficult things when you kind of get into some of these cities doing like the regional hauntings. Obviously, it was a big thing with Serbia, but just as with a lot of American cities, there is really difficult history, or prisons, like you're dealing with a lot of intersecting things. And
yes. I think with things, and you can see a lot of this being dealt with in the true crime landscape as well recently, that I think people are just getting a bit fed up of mythologizing certain characters and not remembering the people that suffered. And you can apply that to any enslaved peoples across the world at the end of the day. And some of these stories, I know the Myrtle Spring plantation has started to have a bit of a pushback from people claiming that the ghost tours and things are celebrating slavery, which I don't think they are. But I think it shows that when you're dealing with the traumatic histories of places, that not only have you got to deal with the whole history of the slave trade in the Western world, let's not think that America's the only culprit here, because they weren't. Of course. And let's not think that America, Britain, and Canada were the only three countries in it, because Spain, Portugal, and France never seemed to get a mention, and were as prolific, if not more so, in certain eras. I think when you've got all that enmeshed on top of civil wars and the changing of state boundaries and the Wild West and things like that, and the rise of certain aspects of certain cultures in certain parts of the US, sometimes you can quite innocently, perhaps, talk about certain stories and certain characters and not understand the concept or the reality of the story you are telling. Probably the best example of that is the Goat Man in Texas.
Oh, is that the Pope-Lick Goat Man?
Is he the Pope-Lick Goat Man? Or is he just a Goat Man? Pope-Lick's in Kentucky, isn't it?
Oh, yes, you might be. Yeah, pardon me, yeah. So I don't know if I'm familiar with the Texas Goat Man.
The Texas Goat Man was a black man who was a very successful goat farmer in that particular area, who was lynched by the Klan.
Oh, my God.
Because he was successful.
Of course, yeah.
And I think this 1938. And so the story now is obviously of some kind of hybrid goat man running around, but its essential origins, you could suggest, is basically a racial slur that became a paranormal story. And so sometimes you've got to be really careful about which version you're telling. And this is the problem you'll get these days, is that certain stories get popular, but nobody seems to bother to check how and why they started.
Of course.
That's a prime example. It's probably the worst example you can think of. But that just shows you that, it's very similar to the demonation of women and witches. It's very similar, you know? Yeah. The vast majority of people that were murdered for being users of witchcraft were women. Yes, there were men killed as well, as Salem shows, along with many other incidents across Europe. And so it's a very similar thing. I'm not saying they're the same. They're similar. They people are marginalized and victimized because of who they are, and then changed into some kind of paranormal fantasy for some people. And I'm glad, especially when it comes to witches and the trials of the past, there seems to be a real push to get these travesties, these heinous miscarriages of justice struck from everybody's record books. And they should be. It's ridiculous. Nutty men with the self-written Bibles deciding who's a witch and who isn't. You know, like James I, who decided that a witch had sunk a ship and therefore every woman who looked a bit strange needed to be offed, is a prime example. And we still see the ramifications of that in modern culture, regardless of what people may say. There I am. going woke.
No, man, I'm with you. I'm with you. I mean, again, the Pope, or not the Pope like goat man, sorry, that was in the Crimes of the Paranormal, so that's why it's on my mind. But no, the goat man story you're talking about, like, yeah, that's a great example of something where if you're not careful, you're reinforcing a legend that is essentially created to obfuscate history. You know, it's a little bit like Brandon was talking about on the last show with Lake Lanier. You know, like that has now that has become more part of the story, the terrible crimes that happened prior to the flooding of the towns. But, you know, so often these things can kind of be used as a way to excuse certain things or hide certain things. Like say with the witches, that was just a bunch of dudes pissed off at people not being under their direct control. You know, we can't manipulate these women. We can't make them do what we want to do. They refuse to live under our very narrow interpretation of what Christianity is. Therefore, they must be up to something. And if I've learned anything, especially from this last little while, it's the people who are really trying to convince you of how virtuous they are that you need to worry about. And that's why I tell everyone I meet I'm a real piece of shit. Because sometimes I'll say something like for example, actually, this is my little soapbox thing. I am sick to death of guys roughly my age, I'm 41, spending a lot of time and effort talking about how everything that doesn't directly cater to their interests is somehow bad, and that that anyone who's trying to improve anyone else's situation is virtue signaling, and that the kids are that there's something wrong with the youth. You know, the youth aren't as respectful. It's the saddest shit in the world, and it just says to me that you have failed as a human being to craft a worthy life in which you feel satisfied, because you're trying to blame other people for why you're miserable, and you're trying to come up with some reason like, no, it's not a systemic problem. You know, it's whatever. It's like, it's not because I've been a shitty person and no one likes me. It's like, no. The world has gone woke and it's against me. It's difficult for me. And it's just the saddest goddamn thing in the world. And I keep seeing it. People I respect too, or did respect, will start throwing that out there. They've got the money, you know, they're doing well, but they are just convinced that somehow the world is arrayed against them. And I have no fucking time for that whatsoever. Like, I get it, right? You're getting older. I'm getting older. You're getting older, you know, but you, Paul, are also getting older. Well, not really. You're the Count Saint Germain, but we got to lie to the people so they don't chase you out of the village yet.
They hope.
But like, I get it, right? Because, you know, the world starts moving away from you. You are sort of age out of being in the demographic that the culture is like catering to. And I know for a lot of folks who grew up with the internet, they're like, the internet was the new thing that came up when they were kids. The internet's now moving away from them. You know, it's moving towards the youth. And that's really fucking hard for these people, because they grew up with the internet being like their thing. We are the first people to cruise the internet. We're the first people to like come up with memes and all this shit. And all of a sudden, it's not catering to them anymore. And they're not dealing with it very well. And like, I get that. I get fearing cultural irrelevance. I get fearing death. But you got to stop making it other people's fucking problem. And positioning your fear as like a moral virtue. You know, like, again, I'm scared for my interests, but somehow I'm going to try and turn this into, actually, I'm scared for the world. Not for me, for the world. Get the fuck out of here.
It just makes me laugh. I see people I grew up with who would be getting shit-faced at 16 in the local park, who seem to be horror-struck that their teenage children would be doing such things.
Yeah.
And I just think, at what point do people start forgetting what they did as children? Or, you know, it's that kind of thing. Oh, modern music. Oh, it's all just noise and banging. People turn into their parents and they don't seem to realise it. And then one day they wake up and they're just wearing slacks and a pastel jumper, and they're just sort of watching television, just normal standard television every day. And in the blink of an eye, they've transformed into everything that they'd spent their life rebelling against. And if I ever get like that, I'm going to shoot myself in the head.
Oh, I was joking about this on Twitter the other day with some folks. I'm like, if I start doing this shit, I want you to send me out for the long walk, like Judge Dredd, just out into the cursed earth, because it's just the most embarrassing thing. And again, it's not about like virtue signaling. It's not about being woke. It's not whatever the fuck. Whatever loser bullshit that these people will come up with to try and ignore the crux of what I'm saying. It's just, stop bitching about you no longer being the center of society's focus. Have enough of a fucking internal life that you don't need that. And like I said, I get it. I'm not immune to this. The difference is I keep trying to choose not to be that thing. Because like you said, if you're not careful, you just end up becoming the thing you're trying to get away from. I discovered, and I haven't talked about much on the show, but we discovered my biological grandfather on my dad's side. This has been a big question mark for a very long time. And through a combination of means, which I'm not going to get into because it'd be boring as shit, Nick managed to figure out who that was. And tell you what, Paul, he's a real piece of shit. Like real piece of shit to like the point where it's in the newspapers. What a piece of shit this guy was. And a lot of the stuff he did, even though my father never knew him, my dad also did. And so I feel those same pulls to being a piece of garbage in my bones. But the thing is, I keep making a different fucking choice. And when people don't do that, it annoys the shit out of me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People seem to be perturbed that there are consequences for saying things these days. And I think that's the biggest thing they can't deal with. I used to be able to talk shit about anybody and nobody would say anything. Now you can't even say horrible things about women and people of colour without someone getting at you. It's ridiculous. How can I not be misogynistic and racist? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, what do you mean I can't
Fuck
just...
off.
Yeah, right? What do you mean I can't just spew hateful shit for no reason?
How dare you challenge me and my bigotry? The world's got mad.
That's another thing. I swear to God, folks, we're gonna move on to the next email here soon. But like, you really did something here, Lisa. So people say you can't say anything anymore. Motherfucker, you can say whatever you want, but you got to stand behind it.
Yeah.
So that's why I try not to say shit on the show that I don't believe. And there's been the odd time I'll say something and I'll just kind of very flippantly say something. And then someone will write in and go, hey, what the fuck? And most of this happened on the old version of the show back like 2020 and before, because I was still getting used to being on the mic and the fact that anyone would be listening just seemed kind of impossible. And yeah, sometimes I'll hear what they're saying and I think, oh yeah, that was ill-advised. You know, I'm not going to apologize to every single person who emails me because that would be exhausting and pointless. But the thing is, you say, oh yeah, I'm going to do better. But if I said something egregious, I would apologize. But the thing is, I just try not to say shit that I don't stand behind. And if I fuck up, if I make a mistake and I get something wrong, I go, oh yeah, sure. Okay, my bad. And again, if I get it really wrong, like we got a couple emails on the last about something we said on Haunting of Serbia about, there was a difference of opinion regarding a statement that was made. And I was like, well, I don't think this deserves an apology, but yeah, I'll go back and fix it. And there's an amendment in the episode. And yeah, fine. No, we'll acknowledge we made a mistake. I think that's a mark of like adulthood and maturity.
Yeah.
Where you say, oh, you know what? I did believe in this thing and turns out I was wrong. So you go and you acknowledge that and you move forward. You just do better. But it drives me crazy when people say you can't say anything anymore. No, you can say whatever you want, but you got to stand behind it. And if you don't like the way people treat you when you say something, then you got to start looking at what you're saying and asking yourself, oh, what does this say about me as a person?
Exactly. Or you could try and avoid numerous sexual assault allegations by pretending to convert to Christianity and start baptizing people in a river.
Oh, that's a Russell Brand reference, folks.
Who?
Yeah. Now, if there's anyone who should be driven into the sea.
Hey, I've been on the he's a dickhead cart for about 20 years. It's about time everybody got on it. There's been loads of room for ages.
All right. Next up is from Yana. Is this me or you?
No, I've lost my script. It's you cheeky monkey.
Gasp. All right. So next up is from Yana. Yana says, hey, Bren, I was wondering if you listen to the Rewatchables podcast, in your spare time. Lol. They did a Pulp Fiction 2-parter recently. Anywho, just curious as I know you like films and people who like to deep dive. Hope you're well. Well, thank you, Yana. I have not heard of the Rewatchables, but if I do end up with some of that spare time and keep talking about, I will check it out.
Yeah. Tarantino's second best film.
Pulp Fiction?
Yep.
Now, what's the first?
Kill Bill.
Interesting. Volume 1. Okay.
Volume 2's third.
Interesting. Yeah, it's hard to beat his early stuff. I mean, just in terms of sheer kinetic energy about them. I mean, I do love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That's probably top 2 for me between that and Kill Bill Volume 1. But yeah, that's a tough call. I really like a lot of his newer stuff because I like the more like measured pace of them. But when each one of them is like 3 hours long, that does start to get wearing.
Mm.
You know what I've only seen once, and I keep meaning to watch it again, but I just cannot make myself watch it again, is The Hateful Eight.
Yeah.
I remember liking it well enough, but I just have never thought, boy, I want to watch that again.
That's one of those films, it's 30 minutes too long.
Yeah.
It's a bit flabby in the middle.
I know Netflix let him cut it into a miniseries, but it's only available on the American service, so I've never actually been able to watch it. Although I am very curious to see how that would have changed the narrative, because apparently it's a little longer. Like, there's a few more scenes that flesh things out, but again, it's cut into 45-minute episodes, so it's a little more digestible. And I'd be really curious to know how that changes it, if at all.
Yeah. I always remember going to see Kill Bill Volume 1. Another film where I was laughing hysterically, and clearly a lot of people in the audience must have thought, where's this guy been released from? Sorry, I've just got a black sense of humour. I do apologise.
Well, that was like me in The Substance. There's me and these two gals sitting at the back of the theater. All three of us were just howling during The Substance, and everyone else just sat there in funereal silence.
Yes, I remember that. Going to see Rambo 4. And it's one of the first, it's probably the only occasion I can remember people getting up and leaving from a film.
Really?
Yeah, during the shelling scene.
Right at the end?
No. Prior to that, when they all get captured, when all the missionaries get captured.
Oh, right. I mean, it was a violent film, but I don't know what it says about me that I didn't think it was that violent.
I think the thing with Rambo films is you've got to sort of take a step back from them, especially the third one's hilariously stupid, you know.
Oh yeah.
Whereas the fourth one, I quite like the fourth one. I think it's my second favorite after First Blood.
Yeah, I think the fourth one is solid. I think that the biggest issue with the fourth one is just that it's so bleak. It's bleak in a way that the others aren't. It's more, it presents itself as more gritty and real instead of cartoonish.
Yeah.
You know, like the violence is still over the top, but it's over the top in a much more dark way instead of that sort of like, again, sort of cartoonish 80s way of part 2 and 3. And I will say, they never made a part 5, but if they had, I bet that would have been ugly dog shit. I was actually going to say there's a film that just dropped on Netflix about 2 weeks ago, which is sort of like First Blood-esque kind of movie. It's called Rebel Ridge.
Oh, with Don Johnson in.
Yeah. Don Johnson.
I saw the trailer yesterday. I thought, that's the kind of action film I like, where somebody kicks bad people's asses.
It's so good. It is so good. And what's cool is Aaron Pierre, who plays the lead, his character is essentially, I won't spoil it because who he is kind of a reveal in the film. But the point of his character is that he never kills anyone. So what he does, he brutally fights back against this corrupt small town police force, but he does so in non-lethal ways, and it gets quite inventive in places, and it's very, very good.
Yes, I don't know what, it just popped up on Prime yesterday, and so I thought, I'll watch that. And then Don Johnson popped up, and I thought, yeah, okay, I'm interested now. I've watched the Marlboro Man. What's it called? The Marlboro Man and the what? Oh,
Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man.
I've watched Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man, so I've got a Don Johnson level, and this looks above it.
It sort of makes a great pairing with Johnson did a film in like 1989, I think, called Dead Bang, which
yes,
where he goes to war against a bunch of neo-Nazis.
Yes.
And so I think if you were to watch that and then watch Rebel Ridge, it's like a great, if you live long enough, you see yourself become the villain double feature.
It's an excellent suggestion. Next up, Kathy says, I do have a couple of little stories, but the reason I'm writing today is your support on mental health. It really puts my mind back to a place when I hear you talking about not being alone. I've been going through the roughest year of my life. In February, I found out I'd got breast cancer. Then, during chemo, my partner of 21 years decided to leave me from someone off a dating site. Now they're threatening to sell up the house, so I'm struggling to stay sane for my two boys and not panic about the future. When I listen to you joke and tell stories and offer the support, it grounds me when I need it the most. You are very special. Thank you.
Kathy, I don't know what to say, but thank you. And I'm happy that we can offer some kind of comfort during what sounds like just a horrible, horrible time.
Yes. As many of us either performing this podcast, obviously covering all our personalities there, Brennan, and animals, and many of our listeners who are candid and honest enough to share their personal struggles and stripes and battles. There are lots of us about. So you're not alone, my love. And I would guarantee that there's somebody right now going through exactly the same thing, feeling exactly the same. So if we can shine a little bit of light into a dark year for you, then we are humbled and honoured, and thank you, and keep fighting.
Next up is Katrina. Katrina says, wow, imagine my surprise when I settle down for a well-deserved hotel room nap in Canterbury with my favorite podcast, and I hear my letter being read by none other than Paul Bestel. Of course, I popped right up and listened since all hope of a refreshing nap was dashed, but it was so worth the thrill of hearing my letter being read aloud. Unfortunately, I was alone with my joy and excitement, as I had quite enough of my poor husband's company by then, and asked to be alone so I could unwind and get a little sleep before heading out for the evening. I respect that. I respect that a lot, Katrina, because sometimes, man, it's like, I love you, but now I would like to be on my own. I live on my own for that reason. Katrina goes on to say, well, to sum up our trip, it was great. We saw so much in London and came to understand why they have a strict 2 martini maximum at Duke's. Eek, never again. Those must be very strong martinis. Ate some fantastic fish and chips and impressive pie and mash in a pub, had lovely tea at the Shard, ran around London, Norwich, and Canterbury, and met so many nice people. We spent a few nights at the Maid's Head in Norwich, but sadly had no encounters of the ghostly kind. I had many things on my must-do list, and mudlarking was one of them. After an interesting behind-the-scenes tour of Shakespeare's Globe, we noticed a tide was going out on the Thames, and I saw quite a few other people going down to dig around in the mud, so I joined them. My husband shook his head at his weird wife and went to find a quiet place to have a coffee. He knew I was fascinated by the pastime. I belonged to a Mudlarking on the Thames Facebook group. That's awesome. And after being together since 1985, knew better than to try and dissuade me. I found nothing of value, some bones, pottery shards, a couple of broken pipe stems, and a clay pipe bowl. But hey, I went mudlarking in the Thames in London. Fucking A. We are already planning on our next trip back. My husband was also able to visit St. Mary's Church in the lovely village of Westmill, and we found some headstones of his ancestors, the Wymans. We did get a few curious looks when our North American accents were detected in a pub, and a curious fellow asked very directly if we could tell him just what the hell is going on over there. We all know what he was referring to, and unfortunately we had no good answers for him. We will all be hanging on tenterhooks for the next 6 weeks while we wait for this ridiculous and embarrassing shit show to play out in the good old USA. Brennan, I'm so sorry that you guys must endure living upstairs to this out-of-control neighbor that is the US. I loved all the mushy peas and also ate all my husband's mushy peas. Also, after hearing of your finding a sad dehydrated hedgehog this summer, I was obsessed, to my poor husband's annoyance, with seeing one in the wild. Alas, no wild hedgies were spotted. I'll be back. Anyways, you guys are so much fun to listen to. Keep up the good work. It is so appreciated by so many. Kitos. Thank you and finish. Katrina. Well, Katrina, we are thrilled that you had such a great time. That sounds so cool. Of course, I remember reading your message when you were getting ready to go.
Yes, but I'm glad to hear you enjoyed the mushy peas. Excellent taste. But please visit the north next time, Katrina.
And we have one more message. Then we will head out for the night.
Yes, this is from Julia, who writes, Brennan and Paul. First, the obligatory apology for this being way too long, and a bit of a selfishly therapeutic ramble. I've been a faithful listener from the beginning, since around episode 3, if memory serves. I found you whilst trying to dig up shit on the Warrens. And that led me down quite the wormhole. Sadly, it will have done. Regrettably, this proves the Warrens have done some good for the paranormal community. Ooh. I've listened to all the episodes and most patron content at least thrice over the years. I'm definitely guilty of hiding my earphones under my hair at work to stave off desk job blues. Haha. The encouragement, laughter, intelligence, awareness, and community has been a lifeline since the start. In the beginning, GSG helped ease the messy emotions associated with childhood paranormal experiences and parents that blamed them on demons. Helpful. This last year, however, you've helped open my eyes to the crippling relationship that left me riddled with anxiety, depression, and confusion. It's unnecessary to explain the details, but to suffice to say, the accumulation of you and your guests' words finally let me hear the gaslighting I was enduring, and it woke me up to the mental health battles plaguing me. Dealing with severe panic attacks, depression, and generalized anxiety for the first time in my 30s was terrifying. Having a partner who routinely ignored, avoided, and blamed me for its impact was even worse. I cried once more in recognition when you would joke about men who belittle experiences, would call out the bullshit of people who create emotional lose-lose situations, talked about your own decisions to leave emotionally incompatible relationships. Your impact was felt all the more due to being as isolated as we embarked on a business venture and moved to Minnesota to extremely rural Tennessee last year, leaving me without the normal contact of friends and family. Thank you both for being the familiar voices, building me up, challenging me to respect myself again, accept mental health as a priority, and again embrace the spooky nerd I truly am. Mushiness and borderline oversharing out of the way, I'd like to share one of my many spooky encounters. Since I was a child, paranormal experiences were the norm. Most surround the home I grew up in. As mentioned, the activity was largely credited to demonic activity, or my imagination. Fun fact, 20 plus years later, the couple who purchased that house contacted my family to ask if we'd ever experienced the haunting. Validation at last? Or maybe the demons just enjoyed that Validation at last, or maybe the demons just enjoyed the brown shag carpeting and sparkly wallpaper too much to move out. And who wouldn't?
I'm telling you.
Julie? Sounds like the place to be. Fast forward to 2020, it had been years since my last paranormal encounter, and I was house hunting in southern Minnesota. I came across a cute older home on a beautiful large lot with mature trees. I pulled up to the home just as the sun was setting, making the many windows of the lit-up house easy to see into. I witnessed several people, at least 3, maybe 4, of differing builds, genders and ages, walking up the stairs as I exited the car. Naturally, I assumed it was another realtor taking potential buyers for a tour. I found my own realtor inspecting the tiny shed behind the house. He laughed nervously and said, "I think this house is haunted." He explained that upon arrival he unlocked the front door, placed a large heavy doorstop in front of it so it wouldn't close. When he came back from turning lights on inside, he found that the doorstep had been moved several feet and the door had been shut. That doorstep was a heavy metal object. I would have had trouble lifting it, so no wind, rain, air pressure, etc. could have been to blame. Okay, that's weird. But we proceeded to walk into the house. Remember those people I assumed were a prior showing? They didn't exist. There wasn't a single other person inside that home. So whom or what did I see walking up those stairs? Needless to say, I did not purchase that house, but it still makes me wonder what haunting of Hill House shenanigans would have happened if I had. P.S. A question for you two and the GSG community. I've always wondered if people with heightened paranormal sensitivities can attract the notice of others with the same inclinations. Over the years, I've had many people, several of them complete strangers, say I seem spiritually aware, ask if I'm psychic or can make future predictions, wonder if I can feel presences and the like. These questions are rarely prefaced by a situation or conversation that would prompt the questions, so it has always struck me as odd. It seems the sensitivity that makes me so aware of paranormal activity is not only a receptor, but also an emitter of sorts. Has anyone else experienced this sort of phenomena? Thank you again, Ghost Story Guys and Mysteries and Monsters. Continue to raise the bar for all other podcasts and listener communities. Your loyal and grateful listener, Julia.
Well, Julia, I'm honored to have played even a small part in helping you work your way out of that relationship. Honestly, Paul, again, just like honored and humbled when people say stuff like this, but it's also kind of it's almost hard to hear in a way, because even though I do this show and have done now for almost 8 years, it's weird to think that I exist in people's heads when I am not directly in front of them.
Yeah, it is. It's humbling. But I think it speaks volumes of the mutual respect we have in our listeners' community and ourselves, and long may it continue to be a safe space for all, apart from bigots.
And hey, you guys can come on board. You just got to stop being assholes.
our Cowboys fans.
Yeah, well, yeah, them too. All about the coaching.
Certainly is this season. Woo! Go Commanders!
As to your question, I actually, I think what it is I think you attract people you vibe with, is what I think it is overall. I think, like my friend Steve, something he's talks about as long as I've known him is this idea of like everything's kind of vibrating. That's just the nature of matter. And so he sort of has this theory that, it has more to do with harmonics. He's a very smart guy. I don't understand all of it, but he thinks that you kind of attract the people who are on the level, who are like on a level with you.
Match your resonance, yeah.
Yeah, who match your resonance. And I think I think it's good and I think it's bad, because I think sometimes if you're in a place where there aren't a lot of people who vibe with you, then you can really start to feel like there's something wrong with you. Like that was kind of one of the many reasons I'm not in Victoria anymore, right? It's just because there's nothing wrong with it as a place. I don't particularly enjoy being there. And there's not a lot of people there I really connect with. Just after a while, you start to feel like, again, like there's something wrong with you. So I think you kind of need to move yourself. Actually, I had a really great conversation with another podcaster. I won't say who, but he was telling me about volunteering for some stuff. And he just started, you know what? I'm going to volunteer for this. And it's really kind of helping expand his world where he is. Because, he was in a place where he's like, fuck, I don't know anyone here. And I think that's what you have to do. You kind of have to step into the stream a little bit if nothing's coming. Because I think if you keep doing the same shit, you don't meet cool people. And that's kind of like, again, that's been my philosophy the last couple of years, is like, all right, this is going to cost me a lot of money and I'm going to be away from my wife more often than not, but I got to step into the stream because I keep repeating the same cycles and I just keep coming home miserable.
Yeah. I think I saw something very interesting recently on Threads, I think it was. And someone was sort of postulating that the reason we all tend to sort of find this area in our sort of 30s and 40s is that we finally get to a point where we unlearn everything that we were taught to comply by from being that weird kid when we were like 8 or 9. And so we've sort of programmed ourselves to fit in and not stand out for like 20 years until we get to a point where we think, fuck it.
Yeah.
I like being that weird kid and I want to be that weird kid again, because that's who you are.
That's it. You kind of got to find your way back to the thing you were before the world fucked it all up for you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you to everyone who sent in their messages. And again, keep sending them in. We're going to try. We've got another episode or interview coming up on the next Talk Spooky, but we're still going to try and get some mail in depending on how long that conversation goes. So send us your comments, your questions, anything you want us to answer to ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. We also try to get to Spotify comments. We're seeing a lot more of those lately, which is very, very cool. Instagram comments when we can, all that stuff. So again, ghoststoryguys@gmail.com or everywhere else you find the show. And we will very much we'll definitely read whatever you put, and we'll try to get it into the show as well. All right, my friend, where can everyone find you online?
You can find Mysteries and Monsters across all social media networks except one, and all podcast platforms as well.
Fabulous. You can find me as Largely the Truth on most social media websites, although I'm most active on Threads and Instagram. You can find the Ghost Story Guys on Instagram as The Ghost Story Guys. And you can find my daily horror fiction podcast, Fear Daily, everywhere fine podcasts live or at feardaily.com. As always, we like to finish Talk Spooky with a tune. This time around, we're featuring the band Waveform Mountain with a single from their 2024 album, Processing. That single is Everything Changes. Again, that was released in 2024. And John Woodland, who is, I believe, the songwriter of Waveform Mountain, says that the lyrics of this song were inspired by his Parkinson's diagnosis in November of 2022. If you like what you hear, check out more from them at waveformmountain.com. You can also find them on Instagram at instagram.com/waveformmountain or on YouTube, also at waveformmountain. Finally, we will have all those links in the show notes. Thanks as always for listening, folks. We will see you next week for episode 199 with another very special guest. And until then, we will leave you with Waveform Mountain and Everything Changes.